This dinner and keynote presentation, as already stated, is a fundraiser for the Renita Logan Endowed Scholarship of the Coastal Carolina Community College Foundation. Renita was a beautiful soul, a remarkable woman who knew that her heroic struggle with diabetes was not going to end well. And she would be very, very proud to know that the endowed scholarship in her honor will help African American female students pursue their dreams at Coastal Carolina Community College. So it is not only fitting, but very touching that the signature event of this year's Black History Month program at the college features one of the genuine heroes of the civil rights movement, Mr. Hank Thomas. Growing up in the late 50s and early 60s in Laurel, Mississippi, I have always believed that part of the reason that this nation has struggled for so long with the issue of civil rights is that we did not do the job we should have done in showcasing the many Black heroes of our nation. There are actually 4 of them here tonight, probably a whole lot more, but 4 that I'm going to talk about very briefly, that are very, very special to Coastal Carolina Community College and its second president, the greatly overrated one. The first is Mr. Pete Burgess, the sharecropper's kid from Richlands, North Carolina, who made such a profound impression on the national founder of Chick-fil-A Corporation as a student and a night manager at the restaurant in Greenville, North Carolina, while earning his degree at ECU, that he was offered the first franchise in Jacksonville and Onslow County, and he was 23 years old at the time. He's a recipient of the Chamber Small Business Person of the Year Award and was recently recognized with its coveted Civic Honor Award. And a few years ago, he was flown to Atlanta and honored as the National Chick-fil-A Franchisee of the Year. The second is a genuine Marine war hero, the first Black officer ever to command a Marine recon unit in combat. His unit was nearly wiped out when attacked by an overwhelming force of North Vietnamese regulars, and Congressman Walter Jones and a valiant young Marine corporal named Dixon tried very hard to upgrade his award for valor under fire to the Congressional Medal of Honor. They didn't succeed, but he proudly wears the Silver Star and more Purple Hearts than any living Marine veteran. He was seated at the head table at this year's MARSOC Marine Corps Birthday Ball as the personal guest of the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Joe Dunford. Ladies and gentlemen, Major Jim Capers, U.S. Marine Corps retired. The third is Mrs. Dora Gaskin. She is the wife of Lieutenant General Walt Gaskin, U.S. Marine Corps retired, one of the heroes of the Al-Anbar awakening that brought an end to the war in Iraq. General and Mrs. Gaskin have honored us by building a home in Jacksonville, and please give my regards to one of my all-time favorite Marines, Mrs. Dora Gaskin. And the fourth Black hero, the one you've been waiting for, whom it is my great honor and privilege to introduce to you, is our featured speaker for the evening, Mr. Hank Thomas, one of the 13 original Freedom Riders, and I believe only 6 now left alive, is that right? 2 now, holy moly. And a true icon of the civil rights movement. The printed program for this evening's event is on your table, and it includes a brief bio of this man's truly remarkable accomplishments. If you have not had a chance to review it, please take it home with you and read it carefully at your leisure. I can assure you that you will be astonished at the risks this now legendary figure in the proud history of the civil rights movement took, as well as the verbal abuse, the personal threats, the beatings, the arrests, the fines, and the incarcerations he endured. Of his 22 arrests, 22 times he was arrested, he simply states that he considers them, like Major Caper's Purple Hearts, a badge of honor. And then, as if he had not endured enough for his country, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, became a combat medic, what our Marine friends call a devil doc, and was so badly wounded that he spent 6 months recovering at Walter Reed Army Hospital. And then 27 years later, he accompanied 3 other U.S. Army veterans to Vietnam to meet and share experiences and stories with combat veterans of the North Vietnamese Army. Having found and survived both the worst the enemies of the civil rights movement as well as his former enemies on the battlefield could throw at him, he decided it was time to take on the challenge of American capitalism. He started out in the laundromat business, then became a very successful franchisee in the fast food industry, and eventually owned 6 McDonald's restaurants. Today, in addition to his restaurants, he owns a number of successful hotels. Not surprisingly, 2 of Hank Thomas's heroes are Pete Burgess and Major Jim Capers. He comes back to this community not only to check on his heroes, but because he truly loves this unique community of heroes. He is the son of one of the original Montford Point Marines, and he has been an inspiration for thousands of young black men and women, many of whom he has provided scholarships, career advice, and in some cases, their first step up the economic ladder. Please help me welcome a genuine American hero, as well as one of my personal heroes, Mr. Hank Thomas.
Good evening, and thank you very much. On the wall of the Fulton in Washington, D.C., there are 58,195 names. They are both black and white, they are Asians and Hispanics. They are sons, husbands, brothers, uncles, and relatives and friends alike who have answered their country's call and gave their full measure of devotion. Major Jim Capers and I asked that the next time you visit the nation's capital, we want you to visit the wall. We want you to find a name, touch it, and call out to him. And if you are able, find a place for him deep inside of you and keep it with your own. And be not ashamed to tell him that you love him, though you may not always have. Learn well the lessons he has taught you with his dying. And pray with him his prayer that the day will soon come when brave men everywhere will be unafraid to say publicly, war is organized insanity. And as you leave, give him a backwards glance as you head for the places that he can no longer go, and bid them to rest forever in peace as you leave those gentle souls behind. Day is done, gone the moon, and gone the sun. All is well, safely well. God is nigh. I am a freedom rider. I am a Buffalo soldier. I am a friend of Jim Capers. I am my grandfather's grandson. I am my Munford Point father's son. Last night I saw Dr. King, alive as you and me. Says, "I but Dr. King, you're many years dead." "I never died," said he. "Oh, that evil man, he shot you. He killed you," said I. "It takes more than bullets to kill a dream," says Dr. King. "I didn't die." Standing there before me, smiling with his eyes, said, "What they can never kill will go on to organize. From Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas too. Wherever oppressed peoples fight for their rights, it's there I will be with you." I fought for the right to be called a man. I am one of the 13 original Freedom Riders. And yes, I have known rivers. I have known rivers as ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. And my soul has grown deep like those rivers. Yesterday, it was Selma. Today, it is Ferguson. And these particular events reaffirms for us that our quest for dignity and human rights still continues. The struggle for all men and women to have the rights guaranteed to them by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is, regardless of race, sex, or sexual preferences. The absence of fear or being misunderstood or mislabeled. The right or the dare to wear a hoodie or to listen to loud rap music and not be labeled a gangster. Or when you encounter the police, that they don't assume that you're armed and are reaching for their gun. The struggle of people of color to be seen as men and women with all of the attributes that the term applies. Sadly, for as much progress as we have made and as far as we have come as a country, we have not come far enough. Yesterday, we fought for the right to vote. Today, voter suppression is the new rallying cry. The civil rights movement brought about changes to many unjust laws. A casual glance at my rap sheet of 22 arrests, one could easily conclude that I was a career criminal. Well, I was. I was a criminal. I was charged with treason against the state of Mississippi. I was charged as an outlaw in Alabama because I wanted to come in and stir up the Negroes. I was a catalyst for social change. Freedoms won sometime or easily lost, and each generation must continue to fight, or we could possibly lose some of the wonderful things that we have gained. Yes, there still is work to be done. In my 74 years, I am very proud of the role that my generation played in bringing about changes in America. Especially, we discharged bad laws, lots of unjust laws. The unjust laws of segregation and discrimination. And today, stand your ground laws are bad laws and they must be overturned. Yes, I have known rivers. I am a Buffalo soldier. I served with valor in the Vietnam conflict and earned the Purple Heart for wounds sustained there. I fought for the rights and liberties of others while I did not enjoy those same rights and freedoms back home. Major Capers could have come back with the Congressional Medal of Honor around his neck, and in Selma, Alabama, he would not have been able to vote. I am the history of my people. In 1864, when the ex-slave laborers who made up the 54th Massachusetts Colored Regiment, when they made their charge at Fort Wagner, South Carolina, I was there. In my heart and soul, I am a member of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. When the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, who protected the B-24 bombers as they made their bombing runs in Germany, I was there. When the 761st Tank Battalion of General Patton rescued the white soldiers at the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium, I was there. And 100 years later, I boarded that bus just like the members of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, this descendant of ex-slave labor. I was fighting for our freedom here and for the liberation of our people. As stated, I could not vote, be served in a restaurant, or rent a room in a hotel in my hometown. However, like my father and his father before him, when I received my draft notice, I answered my country's call. I left blood on the ground in Vietnam. But that was then. This is now. And the world has turned many times in my 74 years. I've traveled the world far and wide. The country has indeed changed. Mine has it changed. You look around you, and certainly 50, 30, 40 years ago, you would not be sitting in this room today. Today, I am so proud to be an American, and I have never been prouder of my country than that night in 2008. Now the next hurdle, a woman, or Jew, or Latino will be president of these United States. After all, we've tried a lot of qualified and unqualified Anglo-Saxon males. Let's give the women a chance. Yes, I've known rivers. One that is old and ancient as the flow of blood in human veins. I spent my first 20 years of my life living under the American apartheid system. But today, Lord, stony the road we have trod. Bitter has been that chastening rod. It's been felt in the days when hope unborn had died. But with a steady beat, did not our weary feet bring us to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where Barack and Michelle Obama doth reside. I ain't no preacher. I didn't come here to preach, But Jim Capers, somebody ought to say amen. When John Kennedy was elected president, the Irish Catholics rejoiced and were proud, and they should have been. So I'm telling you, when a woman is elected president of these United States, all women and everyone should rejoice and be glad. And one day in the future, a Jew or a Hispanic will be president of the United States. And when that happens, I pray that no one will question their citizenship or ask to see their birth certificate or where they were born, or wonder if they were born in Tel Aviv or Mexico City. Do you hear me, Giuliani, Donald Trump? In my lifetime, I have voted for Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Reagan. I voted for Carter, Bush 1 and 2, and President Clinton. And I am proudest to have voted for President Barack Obama. A man who looks like me, and I'm proud that my country elected a man of such diverse parentage. Yes, since that election night, 2008, I can truly sing, America, you're beautiful. Since that November night, I can truly sing, my country, tears of thee. And yes, since that day, I too am very, very proud of my country. Now, some people say that President Obama is a polarizing figure. Polarizing? Throughout the history of this country, anytime an African American moved into an area that has been previously reserved for white, it is said that he or she is polarizing. 1928, Cadet B.O. Davis enters West Point, the first black at West Point in the 20th century. The majority of the cadets vowed that no one would speak to him during the entire time that he was there. And to a man, they kept their word. No one spoke to Davis for 4 years. He then became commander of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. He rose above the treatment he received from his fellow Americans. When asked why it is that no one associated with him, it is said that they felt he was a polarizing figure. 1947, Jackie Robinson's in a great Major League Baseball, and he catches hell from the white players. They cheered for his failures. They said, "We hope he fails." Does that sound familiar? 1948, President Truman signs the executive order integrating the armed forces. And for the first time ever, black and white military men and women of the same rank received the same pay. But for some people, that decision was a polarizing one. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. Equal educational opportunities. Again, people said that decision polarized the American people. 1956, the Montgomery bus boycott. It was one of the seminal events in the civil rights movement. Protesting racial segregation on public transportation. It is said that Rosa Parks was a polarizing figure. 1957, the Little Rock Nine, again, polarizing individuals. In 1960, the 4 students at North Carolina A&T was the start and propelled the civil rights movement. 1961, 13 people boarded Greyhound buses headed south, blacks and whites sitting together. The 1961 Freedom Rides was a turning point in our fight against mandated racism. 432 people were imprisoned altogether in Mississippi from May through September. 50% of all of the arrested Freedom Riders were white. And of those 50% of the whites, 65% of them were Jews. Lest we forget thee, O Jerusalem. We had allies. 1945, when Germany surrendered, the headlines across the world read, "The Allies defeat Germany." We had allies in our fight for racial justice in this country, whites of goodwill and good hearts, and our most steadfast allies were American Jews. 1964, Mississippi Freedom Summer. In Mississippi in 1964, 90% of all blacks who were eligible to vote could not vote in the state of Mississippi. Medgar Evers, who was assassinated, was a World War II veteran. Hundreds of students, black and white, from the South and the Midwest traveled to Mississippi to help black register to vote. During that particular summer, those 3 months, a total of 30 people were murdered by the Mississippi terrorist group called the Ku Klux Klan. And when those 300 freedom riders were murdered, we all remember the headlines, 2 of them were American Jews. 1965, Selma to Montgomery March over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Congressman John Lewis and hundreds of others were beaten by state horse-mounted troopers. Last week, 50 years later, hand in hand with President George Bush, marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, Barack Obama and his wife, Michelle, and their 2 children. My, how the country has changed. Was it a polarizing event? Oh yes, we have seen rivers, and our soul has grown deep like those rivers. Let me apologize lest I sound a little bit jingoistic. Today, you and I live in a wonderful country. Actions, or better yet, the non-actions of Congress notwithstanding. My experience in the civil rights movement left me with a greater resolve. I heeded the military mantra to be all that I could be. I have climbed mountains and I have reached for the stars. Though I was born in poverty, I never believed that I was destined to remain poor. Yes, I grew up without a lot, but that never defined who I was. I never owned the poverty that I lived in. Today, 50 years after the great civil rights and human rights movement, and hundreds of diverse elected officials later, some of our community still remains in crisis, and the political system alone will not and cannot save them. We, all of us, must do our part to help those who are left behind. For it is both the best of time in this country and the worst of time. In one America that you and I enjoy, the stock market has peaked at over 18,000. The automobile industry that was near collapse today is more profitable than it has been in the last 35 years. But there is another America. Children go to bed undernourished and underfed and hungry. School dropout rates for people of color are escalating. Working and professional class people, some of whom have lost their job, and too many have lost hope. The income gap is widening between the haves and the have-nots. And we believe that America, you are better than this. Today, the world over, people understand that the USA is the land of opportunity. Get to the USA and your dreams can come true. Through many dangers, toil, and snares, I have already come. We live in a country today that is built by and propelled by the energies and the talents of generations of immigrants. Immigrants who are coming here from Europe, South America, Africa, they risked their lives to get here. You and I are already here. Mother's Day 1961 will live in infamy in my mind forever. 7 black and white Freedom Riders, along with 11 other unsuspecting passengers, were almost murdered by a terrorist mob known as the KKK. But just days before, I was arrested in Winnsboro, South Carolina, for using the whites-only restroom. Later that evening, the police took me out of jail and delivered me at the bus station to a waiting Klans mob. I was ordered out of the police car at gunpoint. The police said to me if I didn't get out of the car, they were going to blow my brains out right then and there. I got out, and being in pretty good athletic shape, I figured that I could outrun the mob, but where was I going to run? So as the mob came toward me, I started running, not knowing where I was going to run to. And then unbeknownst to me, an African-American minister who had been notified of my arrest was waiting in the shadows, and like in the movies, he pulled up beside me as I was running and said, "Son, jump in this car, get in the back, get down on the floor, and don't get up." And that's how I escaped from Winnsboro, South Carolina. He drove me to Columbia, South Carolina, where I stayed overnight on the campus of Benedict College. I never knew the name of that minister, and I wanted to meet him because I imagined what they were going to do to me. I wondered what they did to him when he got back. I learned only about 15 years ago who he was, Reverend Cecil Ivey. He died that same year in November. I rejoined the writers in Atlanta, where we were prepared to go into Anniston, Alabama. 2 other writers, John Lewis and Jim Peck, had been beaten so severely in Rock Hill, South Carolina, they were unable to join us. Dr. King and other civil rights activists tried to dissuade us from continuing. They'd heard about what had happened, and they feared for our lives. But we were dreamers, and we were daring. And so we rode into the eye of the tiger and to the city of Anniston, which was a hotbed of Klan terrorist activity. As we pulled into the bus station, the Klan was there, and they started attacking the bus, breaking out the windows. The bus driver, fearing for his life, got off the bus, but he did us a favor. He locked the door so that it only can be unlocked from the inside. And as they've continued to knock out the windows, and then they slashed the tires unbeknownst to us, Attorney General Robert Kennedy was notified, and he called Governor Patterson, who would not take his call. And he said that Governor Patterson must do something to rescue the Freedom Riders. It's only going to be a matter of time before the mob get to them and kill them. Finally, he did get in touch with the governor, and Greyhound got another driver to drive the bus out of that place. And as the bus began to pull out, 3 pickup truck loads of men got in front so that the bus would go no more than about 10 or 15 miles an hour. And just 2 miles outside of Anniston, the tires finally went flat. And believe it or not, it was a coincidence, but right at where it went flat was another mob waiting for us. These were people who had just come from church. It was Mother's Day. They were dressed in their Sunday's best. They had their children with them. Fathers had children on their shoulders. They were there to watch the Freedom Riders get lynched. The males in that mob worked themselves up into a frenzy, and when they still couldn't get aboard the bus, all of the windows had been broken out. And so in their frustration, they shot aboard the bus an incendiary grenade. And immediately the bus started burning in the rear. Within a matter of seconds, the bus was completely filled with smoke. At 19 years old, I had to make a decision. I knew if I got off of that bus, those men in that mob were going to kill me. They had bats, baseball bats. They had all kinds of weapons. And I could only imagine what it would be like to be killed in that manner. So I thought, naively so, that if I took a deep breath of that smoke, that poisonous smoke, it would act as a sedative and it would put me to sleep, and that was the way that I would die. That was the easiest way to die. But when you get that smoke in your lungs, the involuntary muscles take over and you fight for air. And so as I got up off the floor and I ran to the front, as I got to the front of the bus, 2 or 3 men were holding the door. And I could hear them say, they're trying to get out. They're trying to get out. Let's burn them niggas alive. That was the chant that I heard. And I hurled myself against the door 2 times. And just a matter of a few more seconds, I knew I would have passed out. The hand of God reached down, and the fire in that bus reached the fuel tank, and it blew out the back of the bus, and somebody outside said, it's gonna blow, and they all ran, and that was the way we got off of that bus. But they weren't through with us. The bus completely burned up in a matter of minutes. In one of the pictures you might see up there, I'm standing there behind a state trooper. As I got off the bus, a man came up to me and he said, are you all right, boy? And I just kind of nodded my head, and the next thing I know, I saw stars. I was on the ground. He had hit me with maybe something like a baseball bat, knocked me out momentarily. As I struggled to my feet, 3 more men were coming at me, and I looked, and there's a police officer, and he is doing absolutely nothing. So I did something that is indeed death-defying. I ran to the police officer, and I tried to use him as a shield. I put my arms around his waist, and he pulled his pistol. And I knew at that moment I was a dead man. No black man touches a police officer in the South that day, or this day for that matter. And instinctively, I put my hand over my face because I don't know whether I thought that was going to stop the bullet. And he fired his gun in the air and he said, all right, y'all have had your fun. That's enough. No one was arrested. He didn't attempt to arrest anyone. Ambulances were called. A little girl, a little white girl in her house ran out to us with water. And later on, that little girl, you may have seen her on the Oprah Winfrey Show. The Klan had a meeting 2 weeks later, and they wanted to discuss what they're going to do with this little girl, little Janie. She was only 12 years old, but she did the Christian thing. And this Christian terrorist organization wanted to deal with her. Ambulance came, and they were going to take the whites to the hospital, but they could not take the blacks. And so our white compadre says, you can't take them, you won't take us. The laws in Alabama at that time, my friends, 1961, stated that a white ambulance company could not transport a black to a medical facility. That was the law in Alabama. Black ambulance company was called. The same applied to him. He could not take the whites. Finally, again, Robert Kennedy prevailed upon the governor to at least order the police to take us to the hospital. We got to the hospital. We were told by the doctors there that you colored people have to go around to the colored emergency room. Again, our white freedom riders said, we aren't going anyplace. All we needed was some oxygen. They would not give it to us. Word got back to the Attorney General again. And so they finally decided to give us oxygen. And by this time, the mob was at the hospital, telling the hospital people to send us out. Well, we weren't going anyplace. They told us, you gotta leave. We were not gonna go. They locked the doors so at least they couldn't get in. And then they said, if you don't send out the Freedom Riders, we're gonna burn this hospital down. That was America. That was Alabama in 1961. Finally, apprised of exactly what the situation was, Robert Kennedy was able to talk to John Patterson. And he said to him, the death of those Freedom Riders going to be on your hand. You must do something. Fred Shuttlesworth and 5 cars came from Birmingham. And Governor Patterson said, I'm not going to help them, but my troopers won't impede them. And that's how we got out of Anniston, Alabama. The next day, we tried to fly out to New Orleans. 2 different airplanes we had to disembark because of bomb threats. And we finally got to New Orleans, and from New Orleans, we left the South on our way to New York. Within the days that happened and the news that traveled across the world, what happened to us exposed the hypocrisy of American life. Americans of goodwill were embarrassed. And from all over the country, whites came joining the Freedom Rides. As I said to you, all told, 432 people joined the Freedom Rides and were arrested. The oldest member of the Freedom Rides was a man named Alex Weiss. He was a Holocaust survivor. Just 20 years prior, he was in a death camp. The youngest Freedom Rider was 13 years old, who was also sent to prison. 1961 in November, the Interstate Commerce Commission once again stated that segregation in interstate transportation was unconstitutional. And therefore, that ended. The blacks got to go to the back or go around to the back on buses. We were triumph in the Freedom Ride. When I boarded that bus 50 years ago, I was in search of the American dream, my elusive American dream. That dream that states that all men are created equal and they are due dignity and respect. 54 years later, that dream of old has not been tarnished. Today, it is lost neither its tone or its tint, and it still stands a glimmering through the veils of yesteryear. The dream waxes a wondrous beauty, one that is coaxed by smiles and watered by the tears of joy and triumph. Of the 7 Freedom Riders on that bus that was set afire, I am the only one alive today. I have raised my glass to their memories. For memories are all that I have left of them now. And memories, they don't leave like people do. They always stay with you. And it is in the evening of my memories, I visit some familiar places. I go to Anniston, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Selma. And always in my memories, it takes me back to places like St. Augustine and Jackson. And sometimes I listen vainly and I hear the familiar refrains of some familiar songs. They are the music of my youth, the old freedom songs. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep your eyes on the prize. And that song that has become the anthem of oppressed peoples everywhere. We shall overcome. 1961, I was in the springtime of my life. My music was still in me. My song was yet to be sung. Yesterday, when I was young and the taste of life was sweet as honey on my tongue, today I am a man in full. I'm deep in the autumn of my years. Steps that used to be quick and light are now slowed and illuminated by the diminishing glow of an approaching sunset. I can see the lengthening of my evening shadow. I know that my twilight is nigh. For those of you here, I want you to know that when it's time for me to cross that river and go join with my ancestors of the Middle Passage, when I am summoned to come before the village elders to give accounts of my time here on earth, I will quote 2 Timothy. I fought the good fight. I completed my course. I kept the faith. And when they ask me, Henry, why were you arrested 22 times? And why did the state of Mississippi put you in prison and eventually put you on death row? Why did they do that? I will respond to them with the grammatical challenged eloquence of my grandfather. I seen something wrong and I done something about it. Thank you.